Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is trust the map. That's how I ended up in a place where the asphalt ends, and all that's left is dirt, silence, and the feeling that no one had been through there in days. The place looked abandoned, but nothing was broken. No signs, no visible houses, but there was movement. I thought I was lost. In truth, I had crossed a line I didn't know existed. Since that day, I stopped looking for shortcuts. There are places in the United States where the law doesn't reach, where you're not welcome. And sometimes you only find that out when it's already too late. I had left St. Louis before sunrise. The plan was to cross Missouri into Arkansas before late afternoon, taking back roads that cut through the state's oldest rural areas. It was my favorite kind of trip. No rush, no fixed route, just relying on the GPS and stopping whenever I felt like it. Halfway through, the signal dropped. I wasn't worried. It was expected. I took a gravel road detour to save a few miles. One of those small decisions that seem innocent, but change everything. The road narrowed and turned into almost a trail. Vegetation closed in on both sides. No fences, no signs. Still, I kept going. After about 20 minutes, I noticed fresh tire tracks in the dirt. Someone used that road often. I also saw crushed beer cans on the shoulder and an iron chain hanging from a fallen post. It looked like it had been used as an improvised gate, but was now lying on the ground, rusted. I drove past it. Farther ahead, the land opened up. There was a clearing with two structures, a one-story house with a porch and a barn. Everything looked old, but not exactly abandoned. The windows were intact, no graffiti, and the front door was shut with a thick new chain. I parked the car, turned off the engine, and sat for a few seconds. I can't explain it. It wasn't fear, it was hesitation. I got out to stretch my legs. The place was too quiet. No animal sounds, no wind. Everything still. I walked to the barn. The wood was dry, smelling of oil and dust. There were tire marks on the packed dirt floor, like a large vehicle had recently come and gone. I also saw footprints. Large, heavy boots, some overlapping. They weren't old. I walked back to the car slowly. Tried to restart the GPS, but the phone still had no signal. I opened the glove box to grab a paper map, and that's when I noticed the change. The rear view mirror was tilted downward. I knew I hadn't left it like that. The feeling hit instantly, like a cold wave in my gut. I walked around the car. No visible signs of forced entry, but the passenger handle had what looked like greasy fingerprints, like someone had pressed there. The paint had a light scratch, like from a nail or jacket button. I got in, locked the doors, started the engine, and backed up. But while maneuvering, I saw something else. A piece of dark fabric caught in a bush, like it had been torn off. Looked like a coat sleeve. What bothered me was that it was folded over itself, with a button still attached. Someone had passed through quickly enough to rip their clothing and not stop to retrieve it. I drove back to the road in silence, eyes on the rearview mirror at every turn. A few minutes later, the road forked. An arrow painted on an old board pointed left, with the word "fuel" handwritten. I tried to ignore it, kept going straight. But soon I realized I was going in circles. I passed the same fallen tree I had seen 20 minutes earlier. The GPS was still silent. I turned around, went back to the fork, and took the fuel path. After another 15 minutes on a rough road, I saw another clearing. An old pickup truck, rusted in the back, was parked near a wire fence. No house, no people, but there was smoke rising from a metal drum. I stopped the car slowly, without turning off the engine, waited. Nothing. Then I noticed that on the other side of the fence, right at the forest line, there was a trail camera, the kind hunters use. It was aimed exactly at where my car was. From that point on, it was silent survival. I didn't accelerate, didn't honk. Just backed up the car, turned around, and left like nothing had happened. It took over an hour to find a paved road again. When the signal came back, I ignored all notifications. Just opened the map and put in the nearest motel address. The next morning, while fueling up at a gas station, I asked the attendant about that area. He didn't say much. Just that it wasn't good to get lost around there. That there were properties where the government didn't go, and where visitors weren't welcome. I asked about the house with the chain on the door. He looked for a second, chewing a dead cigarette in the corner of his mouth. Said he knew where it was, and that no one had lived there for years. But sometimes people still saw lights on inside. I was driving through rural Virginia, returning from a funeral that took place in Giles County. It was a Sunday afternoon, empty road, dry hills on one side and dense woods on the other. The GPS suggested an alternate route via secondary highway, about 5 miles shorter. Soon the road narrowed, turned to gravel, then to dirt. Typical, but still acceptable. I passed a few isolated properties. Wooden houses, fixed trailers, makeshift fences made of recycled iron gates. After about 20 minutes, I saw an open gate to my left. It was large, made of rusty metal, with a chain wrapped around one side, as if it had been unlocked and forgotten there. Behind it, a narrow private road snaked uphill, disappearing into the trees. A sign hung by a wire, tilted, its letters blurred by time and rust. The only word still readable was, "Keep." I eased off the gas, curious. Something about that image stopped me for a second. The kind of place that feels frozen in time, like no one had passed through in decades. And yet, something suggested it was still in use. I drove on. But in the rearview mirror, I saw the gate begin to close, slowly, no wind, no one around. I stopped the car, just watched. The gate stopped, tilted. The chain swayed gently, like someone had just let go of it. 2 minutes later, I noticed a pickup truck behind me. An old model, headlights with yellowed bulbs, heavy suspension noise. It didn't seem like it wanted to pass nor keep a distance. Just followed me, exactly. Turned when I turned, slowed when I slowed. I kept driving without looking too much. Didn't want to show I'd noticed. At the next intersection, I turned right. So did the truck. I turned left, made a U-turn, changed speed. It stayed with me. There were no stores, houses, or any place where I could stop. We were in a stretch where weeds were overtaking the asphalt and where there were no more light poles. After 10 minutes, I saw an open space to the left, like a path to an old field. I pulled in slowly, leaving half the vehicle visible from the road, as if it were just a quick stop. The truck drove past. I waited a while and restarted the engine. Got back on the road. Less than 5 minutes later, there it was again. Coming from the front. This time, it pulled over to the shoulder. The driver didn't get out. The window was dark, but I could tell someone was inside. I was tempted to stop, to ask if there was a problem. But something told me this wasn't about a problem. It was about watching. I kept going. In the mirror, the truck turned around and started following again. This time, keeping more distance. It went on like that for almost 20 minutes. My tank was half full. I had no phone signal. And the chances of running into a patrol were practically zero. When I saw the sign announcing the next county, I felt relief. A few minutes later, the road improved. Fresh asphalt, lines painted with bright paint. I saw light poles ahead. The truck disappeared. I don't remember exactly when. I stopped at a small gas station with a convenience store. Parked, went in, grabbed a drink, sat in the corner booth. The cashier, a man in his 50s with a worn-out uniform, struck up a conversation. He said the area used to have problems with private guards on big farms. People who patrolled beyond what was necessary. Said some roads cut through private land that no one monitored anymore. That some families had been there so long they made their own rules. I told him about the gate that closed by itself. He paused for a moment, then simply said, "If the gate's open, you can still leave." If it's closed, it's already too late. I left before sunset. Didn't use the GPS. Followed the signs on main roads until I got back to the original route. I never found out if the truck belonged to someone from those lands, or if it was just a coincidence. But since that day, every time I see an open farm gate on a rural road, I slow down. Not to go in, but to make sure it's not closing on its own. It was early September when I went to visit a rural property my father had inherited from a distant relative. The land was in interior Oregon, near the Idaho border. He never talked much about that side of the family, just that they had fallen out decades ago, and no one had been back since. Since he was ill, he asked me to go check the condition of the place. The paperwork described an old orchard, a few sheds, and a wooden house, supposedly uninhabited for over 20 years. I rented a car in Boise and drove to the point marked in the records. I arrived after lunch. The sun was low, but still strong. A dirt road led to the property, passing through quiet valleys, crooked fences, and fallen telephone poles. Upon arriving, the first thing I noticed was the orchard. Withered apple trees, twisted, many already dead. The soil looked too compacted to grow any fruit, but between the rows, there were fresh tire marks, and a smell in the air. Too sweet, like fermenting fruit. Too strong for what I was seeing. The house sat at the end of the path. Small, one-story front porch with 2 steps and a broken chair. There was a chain hanging on the door, but it wasn't locked. I stepped inside, cautiously. The interior looked like someone had left in a hurry. Dishes still in the drying rack, a coat hanging up, faded wallpaper, nothing modern. No signs of recent electricity, but also not too much built-up dust. In the hallway, I saw marks on the floor, like furniture had been dragged back and forth many times. An oval-shaped wear in the carpet showed where a heavy armchair had probably sat. I found a short staircase leading down to the basement. The door was ajar. Natural light barely reached there. I stepped down 2 steps just to look. The smell was different. More humid, like freshly turned soil. I saw a plastic bag stacked, a wheelbarrow, and a shovel with a dirty handle. The floor was packed dirt. Only one part, in the corner, looked different. Disturbed, as if someone had recently dug there and covered it back up. I went back up without touching anything. I headed to the back of the house. There was a rusty mailbox with moldy papers inside. One of them was a county notice about unauthorized activity in agricultural zone. No details. I decided to spend the night in a motel and return with a clearer head the next day. But when I tried to leave, I noticed something. On the car hood, there was a dried mud footprint, just one, in the center, pointing toward me. I looked around. Total silence. No animal sounds. The sky was starting to change color. I got in the car, locked the doors, backed out. As I turned, I saw in the mirror something among the trees. A dark blur. Too still. I accelerated without looking again. On the road, just a few meters from the edge of the property, I saw a pile of animal bones on the shoulder. They were laid out in rows, as if someone had arranged them. They didn't look old. I got to the motel at night, didn't sleep. Kept the light on, watching the parking lot spot through the window. No one showed up. I returned to the city the next day. Didn't contact the county attorney. Didn't finalize any paperwork. I just told my father the place was abandoned and not worth pursuing. What stuck with me, though, wasn't what I saw. It was what I felt when I entered that basement. The way the ground had been covered, the smell trapped in the wood, the tools too clean, the silence all around. Everything told me someone still used that place, that it wasn't decay, it was routine. And in the middle of the dead orchard, there was a spot where the soil was darker. Around it, nothing grew. Now whenever I pass through farmland, I always watch where the vegetation doesn't grow, where the ground looks fresher. I've learned that sometimes what looks old is just waiting for the right moment to come back. I was traveling from Kansas City to Boulder, cutting through rural Kansas via a lesser-known route, US 24. It was summer, high temperatures, a sky too clear, that kind of day where everything seems calm on the outside, but your mind stays on alert for no apparent reason. It had been hours since I'd seen another car. The stations marked on the GPS were either closed or abandoned. When I saw a sign pointing to a rest area with a bathroom and some shade, I turned off immediately. The entrance was gravel, poorly maintained. There was a low fence, 2 concrete benches, and a wooden structure with a roof, like an old shelter. I parked in the shade and got out of the car. The heat eased there, thanks to the tree canopy. The place was strangely clean. No trash, no graffiti, no sign of recent use, but also no sign of abandonment. There was something too still. I grabbed a bottle of water and walked to the back of the shelter. There, behind the wooden wall, was a narrow metal staircase descending into what looked like an old basement or storm shelter. No sign of a lock, but the metal door was just pushed to. I stopped there. I heard the sound of my footsteps, my breathing. And then I heard a noise I didn't recognize. It wasn't loud. A dry, slow, metallic sound. Like a hinge moving, but it wasn't coming from the door. It came from behind me. I turned around slowly. Nothing, but there were footprints in the gravel. 3 different prints besides mine. Deeper ones, like someone heavy had stood there before. I went back to the car, locked the doors, sat still for a few minutes, watching the road through the window crack. No one. Total silence. But then I heard it again. Not loud, almost imperceptible. A sound you can only hear when there's absolute silence. Like the creaking of the car itself. Except the car was off. I checked everything. Nothing looked tampered with. But the mirrors were slightly tilted, as if someone had touched them. Just enough to change the angle. I started the engine. Drove off slowly until I was back on the highway. 5 minutes later, I realized something was wrong with the internal noise of the car. There was a sound coming from the back seat. Faint, a kind of muffled breathing, like the air was circulating the wrong way. The sound didn't match anything the car normally made. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw nothing. It seemed to be coming from inside the trunk. I didn't stop. I didn't speed up, just kept a steady pace. Tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was the heat, a valve, something in the ventilation system. But the sound continued. Constant, regular. After nearly half an hour of non-stop driving, I found a gas station. Pulled up next to the pump, turned off the car, got out and walked straight into the convenience store. The clerk looked at me like I'd seen a ghost. Asked if I was okay. I said yes, that I just needed to stretch my legs. But the truth was I was waiting. Waiting for someone to appear and open my trunk, or for something to come out. Nothing happened. After about 15 minutes inside, I went back out. Opened the trunk with the key from the side, ready to run if necessary. There was nothing. No sign of forced entry, no strange objects, nothing out of place. But the heat inside the trunk was more intense than in the rest of the car. As if something had held heat in there, or someone. I left the trunk open for a few minutes, then shut it and continued my trip. During the rest of the drive to Boulder, I replayed that sound over and over in my head. I don't know what it was. Maybe nothing. But every time I remember, I realize what stuck with me most wasn't the sound. It was the feeling that, for a moment, there was another presence there. Not necessarily a person, but the impression that I wasn't alone in the car anymore. And the strangest thing is, since then, I sometimes still hear that sound. Even now, with a different car, different place, different context. A faint, metallic, muffled noise, always behind me. as if whatever was there never really left. It was during a temp job that I ended up in that place. I had signed up for a service delivering agricultural equipment to remote areas. Follow the route, drop off the delivery, take a photo, done. No direct contact, no conversation. That week, the company assigned me a delivery to an isolated farm in rural Alabama. An industrial sprayer for tractors, according to the note. The address was listed as Miller Property, Route 19, Mile 12. No house number, no visible markers. I drove for almost 2 hours without crossing paths with anyone. Just an old road with tractor marks and barbed wire fences on both sides. When I found the entrance, it was almost unnoticeable. 2 wooden posts with no gate and a narrow dirt trail leading in. No sign, just tire tracks showing the recent passage of heavy vehicles. I drove in slowly, following it for nearly a kilometer until I reached the drop-off point. A simple structure, similar to a modern barn, with a metal roof, cement floor, and a small house about 50 meters away. I parked the truck, got out, looked for any sign of people. Nothing. No dogs, no movement in the house. The grass was too neatly cut for a supposedly abandoned place. I placed the equipment on the ground, took the photo, got ready to leave. That's when I noticed the shed next to the main structure. It was smaller, with old wooden walls and a door left ajar. The delivery note said the item should be left next to the storage, near the access point. I assumed that was the shed. I walked over to make sure. The door was slightly open, no padlock, no visible lock. I stepped inside. The smell was strong, metallic, and dry, like old tools left too long. Inside were shelves with boxes, coiled ropes, buckets filled with metal parts. Everything seemed in order, except for one thing. A security camera mounted on the ceiling, aimed directly at the door. The red light was blinking. I stepped out immediately, pulled out my phone to take a new photo and complete the delivery, but noticed it was restarting on its own. Black screen, unresponsive. That's when I saw the detail that froze me. The house door, which had been closed earlier, was now slightly open. Just enough for someone to watch without being seen. I took 2 steps toward the truck. The back light of the house turned on. I jumped into the vehicle, locked the doors, started the engine. Backing up slowly, I watched the house in the rearview mirror. The door opened a little more. Someone was there. Standing still. I didn't rush. I left slowly, keeping to the narrow trail. When I reached the main road, I turned without looking back. I didn't want to know if someone was following me. I drove for almost an hour until I found another gas station. Got out, went to the bathroom, washed my face. When I came back, there was a notification on my phone. Camera 7, external access recorded. The app belonged to the delivery company. That camera in the shed was part of their system, but I hadn't accessed any camera. The notification included an image captured at the moment I stepped into the shed. But something was off. The image showed my face from the front and someone behind me, not clearly. Just a dark silhouette in the corner, in the background, between the shelves. Small, motionless, partially hidden in shadow. I was alone in there. I was sure of it. I sent the image to my supervisor. Got a response an hour later, saying that property had been deactivated, that no deliveries had been scheduled there since last year. The system had reused an old address, and the delivery note I received was from another route. That location wasn't supposed to be active anymore. I asked if anyone was going to check it out. He said the company no longer sends drivers to that area. If anything was left behind, it stays. I never went back to that state. I still have the photo. Sometimes I look at it, trying to find an explanation. But what bothers me most isn't the figure in the background. It's the certainty that someone, or something, opened that house door just enough to watch me without being seen. And the camera only captured what was in front. Whatever stayed outside the frame. might still be there. If you've ever gone through something similar, or know someone who has, leave a comment below. Sometimes just telling it is already a way to protect yourself. And if this video made you think twice before letting your guard down, then it was already worth it. Here, we don't tell stories to entertain. We tell them to warn, because real fear doesn't jump scare you. It silences. It freezes. And if you want to keep hearing stories that might help keep you alive, subscribe. The next story could be yours.